Huddled against the great bole of the Erd Tree, the Elden Throne awaits its true lord. The royal seat, intricately carved with reliefs of the Erd Tree and panels of elaborate knotwork, has been gathering dust for an age. With Queen Marika and her consort Radagon sealed away behind the impenetrable mantle of barbs, the lands between is crying out for a new lord. But the greater will is an enigma. Many have tried to sit upon the throne, but all have failed. An ocean of blood has been spilled, emboldened by the flame of ambition. Brother on brother, sister on sister, Queen Marika's golden lineage torn apart by rapacious rivalries. But of all the candidates for the title of Elden Lord, there is one who deserves it the most. There is one demigod who can claim that the throne is rightfully his. Not only is he heir apparent, but he is the most honourable of Marika's lineage. No demigod has endured the spiteful discrimination that he has, yet he remains the purest and most loyal of them all. He calls himself the Omen King, but he should be the king of so much more, and he would be the perfect choice. He is as mighty as Melania, as irrepressible as Radahn, a born leader like his father, and beneath his grotesque visage lies a prince as golden as Godwyn. This is the story of Morgott, the last of all kings, and there is no soul more fit to sit the Elden Throne. We need not look to fantasy to see how covetous people are for power. Our own real-world history is brimming with tales of betrayal and corruption, of regicide and fratricide and patricide and matricide. The Wars of the Roses between Lancaster and York is one of countless power struggles in Britain alone. Those war-torn isles have seen conquests from Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings and Normans. And even between invasions there is no shortage of civil war. George R.R. Martin was heavily inspired by these real-world conflicts when writing his Song of Ice and Fire. And there's no doubt that this fascination with political intrigue and power vacuums has been injected into Elden Ring when helping FromSoft to world-build the lands between. In these stories, there are many archetypical rulers. There are compassionate kings and cunning queens, meek monarchs and savage tyrants. Rulers come in all shapes and sizes, but one thing is a surety. Benevolent, merciful, righteous rulers are a rare breed indeed. And when they do find their way to that preeminent position upon the throne, they are swiftly betrayed, and they tend to die with knives in their backs. He is easily overlooked, but there is a candidate for the Elden Throne who possesses these virtues. His only crime was being born with bestial features. That's all. And even then, it strengthened his resolve and made him even more fit to rule. Unfortunately, as history would tell us, the good guy never wins. Queen Marika and her consort Godfrey had produced their golden heir. But you know what they say, every monarchy needs an heir and a spare. So they conceived again. When she was told she was carrying twin boys, Marika cried out with glee, and gave praise to the greater will for such a wondrous gift. Alas, this gift would prove to be a blight upon Marika's golden progeny. On the day of Godwyn's birth, the sun had shone like a great celestial beacon, as if nature itself was celebrating the shining future of Marika's line. Some say that when Godwyn entered the world, he already had a crown of golden hair. When Queen Marika went into labour for the second time, she was carried by Godfrey to her bedchamber. Last time, dazzling sunlight had filled the chamber. This time, there was a ferocious storm. Flashes of lightning illuminated the brazier-lit room intermittently. The wise women had told Marika that childbirth was easier the second time, but they were wrong. Godfrey was almost thankful for the booms of thunder that drowned out her terrible wails. Between screams she crooned. It was a guttural lament, as if she had barely the energy to beg the greater will for a swift end to her suffering. But the queen survived. The sheets of her bed were stained red, and the midwife presented twin boys. Godfrey saw the look of anguish upon his lover's face when they were handed to her. Crooked horns coiled around their heads like demented reefs. Dense grey fur matted their pale flesh. One had a stunted little tail, the other had the beginnings of wings, which Marika felt twitch against her frail hands. She didn't have the strength to cry another tear. She whispered a prayer and let sleep take her. Perhaps the storm would pass and she would wake up from the nightmare, but her prayers were not answered. Her twin boys were omens, the single greatest shame a mother could bear in the golden age of the Erd Tree. Marika was appalled. While she mourned the loss of her second and third sons, she noticed that Godfrey almost seemed willing to accept them, calling them by their names, Morgott and Mohg. She spat the names as she said them. He had that proud paternal look on his broad face. She had already lost 2 sons to the Crucible curse. She would not watch as her husband embraced his bestial side again. She saw Hoarah emerging again beneath that regal crown. Queen Marika took her sons by the scruff of their necks and descended beneath the royal capital. She left Morgott and Mohg in the dank depths of the subterranean shunning grounds, with all the other omens. May the other abominations trample them beneath their mangled feet. As she returned to the surface, she wondered if she would have been better off just smothering them. Morgott and Mohg grew up in the sewers, imprisoned out of the sight of the Erd Tree. Mohg did not take it well. He stewed in darkness, muttering to some being named the Formless Mother. Morgott, on the other hand, found a small opening as close to the surface as he could climb, and through this archway he could just about spy the Erd Tree in the distance. A single beam of beatific light penetrated the darkness, and motes of dun-grey dust almost seemed golden as they danced in that slender ray of heavenly radiance. Every day Morgott visited that isolated spot, high up in the shunning grounds. He fought off basilisks and imps, even other omens. He almost felt like he was approaching the summit of some steep mountain when he climbed the sewage pipes of his prison. But he knew, beneath the imagined fantasy, that even at the summit, he was still confined beneath the cobbled streets of Lanedell, where those people fortunate enough to be born without horns could stroll freely, applicating in the grace of the Erd Tree. When Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring, chaos descended upon the lands between. The Erd Tree sealed the Queen and her consort within its great trunk, imprisoned behind an impenetrable tapestry of twisting tendrils. The demigods came from across the lands to claim shards of the Elden Ring, hoping to assert themselves as the heirs to Queen Marika's empire. It was at this point that Morgott and Mohg broke free from their shackles and returned to the surface. War gripped the capital, yet Morgott failed to notice. He was so wholly overwhelmed by the magnificence of the Erd Tree. It was so much bigger than he had ever dreamt. He realized then that his imagination had been stunted by the confines of his old home. He could not fathom something so immense, soaring skyward. Omens were far larger than normal humans, and Morgott had always needed to hunch over in order to fit through corridors and under doors. As he ascended from the shunning grounds and walked the war-torn streets, Morgott stood tall. The twins made their way toward the Erd Tree, to the site of the Elden Throne. They each claimed a great rune, and Mohg flew away without so much as a farewell. His brother had long ago turned inward, only speaking to the Formless Mother. His blood had turned to fire, and Morgott knew that he had been corrupted. Morgott remained at the foot of the Erd Tree. He had faced great danger every day of his life, climbing to that one spot through which he could receive a touch of the Erd Tree's golden grace. And now that he could bask beneath its incandescent embrace fully, he would not be displaced. Morgott's older brother, the golden child Godwyn, had been slain, and he learned that his father Godfrey had been exiled from the lands between, forced to claw his way back from obscurity. Morgott's father abdicated his claim to the Elden Throne and led his warriors on a long march from the capital, returning to his primordial roots as Hoarah, warrior. His stepfather Radagon was also imprisoned within the Erd Tree, and rumour told that he was merely the male half of Marika, not an individual capable of claiming his own title. With this news, Morgott realised the rightful claim to the Elden Throne belonged to him and Mohg. Only Mohg was gone, following the whims of his formless mother, seeking the throne through treachery. It all became clear to Morgott at that moment. He had spent his life festering beneath the ground, fighting for survival among the damned and the diabolical in the subterranean shunning grounds. But now the lands between were finally his for the taking, and no other demigod had faced the hardships that he had endured. The historians sing praise to General Radahn, for he was relentless on the battlefield, and to Melania, for the severed Valkyrie was the swiftest sword in all the lands. But it was Morgott the Omen King who stood at the foot of the Erd Tree and fended off all opposition. His siblings fought in the wilds of Caelid and beneath the ramparts of Stormvale Castle, and in the foothills of Mount Gelmir, but no other demigod could topple Morgott's claim to the most crucial of regions in the lands between, the Altus Plateau. The site of the Elden Throne was under his control, and not a soul in the realm could do anything about it. Despite being tossed aside by his mother, despite being incarcerated in the bowels of the capital and left to rot, despite everything, Morgott committed himself to protecting the Erd Tree and his mother's golden legacy. But the Greater Will would not accept an omen. The Greater Will would not accept him. Morgott's remembrance states, though born one of the graceless omen, Morgott took it upon himself to become the Erd Tree's protector. He loved not in return, for he was never loved, but nevertheless, love it he did. As an omen, Morgott represented the chaotic past, the formless time before the influence of the Greater Will enveloped the lands between. Before Queen Marika, the Golden Order, and the Erd Tree brought order to the lands, the primordial crucible reigned supreme. In those days, all life blended together, and to be born an omen was to be blessed. The animalistic traits were considered signifiers of the divine. Omens were colossal beings, powerful yet intelligent, the pride of the crucible. But those days had passed, and the Greater Will despised the chaotic elements of the primeval crucible. Morgott could spend an eternity proving his worth to the Erd Tree. He could slay an entire army of tarnished warriors and ward off all of Queen Marika's offspring, but the Erd Tree would continue to spurn him, and the Wall of Thorns would never part for one of his kind. Morgott's unfaltering loyalty to the grace of the Erd Tree is demonstrated through his use of holy, faith-based incantations. His brother turned to blood magic, and you can't blame him, but Morgott's loyalty was intransigent. Morgott spent an age at the foot of the Erd Tree, ever vigilant. He founded the Knights' Cavalry to patrol the dim roads at night, delivering death to wandering warriors, knights and champions. He assumed the title of Morgott the Fell Omen in order to lead the charge on these tarnished warriors, emboldened one and all by the flame of ambition. His reference to this flame suggests that Morgott might have known burning the Erd Tree would have granted him passage through the Mantle of Barbs, but he never succumbed to this temptation. In repeatedly dueling with the Tarnished, Morgott's weariness finally began to show. He extinguished flame after flame, until at last, one Tarnished reached the Elden Throne. He called the other demigods and the hordes of Tarnished willful traitors. He said, "Thy kind are all of a piece, pillagers emboldened by the flame of ambition." Only when defeat seemed an inevitability did his frustration reach the surface. It's revealed that beneath his staff, Morgott had sealed away the accursed blood that had led his brother Mohg to the formless mother's corruption. Morgott too had been tantalized by blood magic, only he had not yielded to it. He recanted the mother's heretical notions, and he formed the cursed blood into a sword. Only when his defeat was imminent did Morgott surrender to the influence of those wicked magics. The thrones, stained by my curse, such shame I cannot bear. And after the Tarnished bested Morgott, he said through pained breaths, "The Erd Tree wards off all who deign approach. We are all forsaken. None may claim the title of Elden Lord. Thy deeds shall be met with failure, just as I." Only in death do we see the true Morgott, the true king, stripped of his omen curse. Beneath his great cloak of ragged fur, stained with the blood of countless slaughtered champions, lies an old, frail man. In another life, without the curse that plagued him from birth, Morgott would have made the mightiest of kings. He had every virtue a ruler could possibly hope to have. He was loyal, he was incorruptible, he was a legendary warrior, fit for a song. This Morgott, the one we see lying before the throne, with a death rattle in his throat, might have been accepted by the Greater Will, but he was too weak to find out. When Godfrey returned to Leyndell, it was clear just how much he loved his son. Godfrey had been Hoaraloo. He had lived in the lands between before Marika's reign, and he respected the primordial crucible of life. The animal traits of the omens would have still been blessings in his eyes. The first Elden Lord embraced Morgott's lifeless husk, and the Omen King was set free. Morgott faded to grace and returned to the Erd Tree. At last he was accepted by the Greater Will. The description of Morgott's great rune says it all. This great rune is the anchor ring that houses the base, and proves two things: that the Omen King was born of the golden lineage, and that he was indeed the Lord Leyndell. Morgott is the true Elden Lord, the rightful ruler of the lands between, but he is destined to die at the foot of the Erd Tree, shunned by the greater will, until he draws his last breath. Thank you for watching. Morgott is potentially my favourite character in Elden Ring, and I hope this story does my love for him justice. Drumora is a new channel, and I'm dedicated to seeing it grow so I can continue to tell these stories. If you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. Please only pledge if you can afford it. I've also started a Discord, so if you'd like to chat to me and anyone else interested in Elden Ring and Elder Scrolls, come join. Thank you so much again. My name's Drew, you've been watching Drumora, and I'll see you in the next one.